That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and today I'm so happy to be joined by a friend, now a longtime collaborator, super funny guy, great writer, comedy director, everything you want in a partner in the comedy game. My friend Brandon Bassham.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Lou. It's good to talk to you. I'm a little under the weather, so if I'm a little extra raspy or hawking up loogies, please forgive me.
I think that's just going to add to it. That's going to add to the mystique of Brandon Bassham. So I've been doing this podcast for a few years now, and I've been working with you on stuff for, probably over 5 years at this point.
I think it's about 6 or 7, because I know the first time we met to talk about working together, I had just dropped my daughter off at preschool. And we went to a coffee shop and we met up. So she was probably about 2 or 3.
Yeah. And I came across your stuff because I think it was Boris Hyken, who's also somebody you've been working with for a while. And I was with We the Internet TV at the time, and I was like, hey, I want to work with good writers. Who can I work with? And also it was like, I want to work with comedy writers who will also be comfortable working, with me and my, the political stances or the political perspectives that I was taking. And, there weren't many people,
well, especially in that era. Yeah.
Especially in that era. Yeah. 10 years, 8 to 10 years ago. But Boris, I think he shared with me a few of like screenshots of like jokes that you had made. This is probably in like Facebook days too.
Yeah. I had a lot of I've had a lot of meetings about my Facebook posts before with the bosses. So
yeah. So that like I think started it. I think it was like, okay, this guy's really funny, and then you get all the experience, and then we met up in a coffee shop in Brooklyn. And do you remember what was the first thing we worked on together? Do you remember?
It's hard to remember. It wasn't the first one, but the forgiving Obama, I forgive Obama was one of the early. It wasn't the first, but it was one of the early ones. That and the Bumblebee Man from the Simpsons thing. Those were, I forget what the very, very first one was, but I know the Westworld thing was one of the first ones, but the big ones were can we forgive Obama for his let's not cancel Obama over bombing Libya, and the Bumblebee Man making fun of what's his face, I can't remember his name anymore, the Apu guy who got mad.
And I'd like to talk about each of these because you reminded me just now of the Obama one, because Obama had left office, and then I forget how long after that he had signed like this big deal with Netflix, right? And it was at a time, and it was at a time where there so many people were being canceled for past behavior. So it was like, I think Kevin Spacey was definitely one of the most well-known ones. And then you came up with this idea. You're like, well, shit, here's a guy who was bombing people.
This guy murdered about 300,000 people and destroyed an entire country. But I think we can look past that. We should separate the art from the artist, and we can still watch his Netflix shows because.
Exactly. And that was a great one because the responses that we got to it were really good. I remember ones in particular. There's sort of like this category of Obama defenders where to them you could only criticize Obama if you're a racist and you're full of hate. Like there's no sort of neutral way of looking at it. Like no, I'm criticizing a president for actions that I don't agree with. It's either you're full of hate and racism. And I remember this was sort of, at the times when where, you know, Facebook was still you know, a really good platform in that, you know, people were actually on it and people were engaging. So like the comment section on the We the Internet TV page was just great, of just people just going back and forth. And yeah, I think at the time, I think I was running the social media at the time, so I was able to actually, you know, get at it with them. But yeah, it's I think that was like sort of a really good example of where, you know, political comedy could actually, you know, unleash some thoughtful discussion, you know, which I thought was interesting at the time.
Well, it came from one, always have a comedy core. I'm not super political, not in that way.
Right.
My politics are what's the funniest thing. And so yeah, I never really have a side. It was just, here's the premise. Like, if we are going to get mad at Louis CK jacked off in front of somebody so we can't watch his stand-up anymore, well, what do you do if a guy murdered an entire country? Can we watch his Netflix documentary? It was that logic, and I liked Obama. Fine, I voted for him twice, so it wasn't like it was, which I think people fall into, and that was one of those things that I remember. Like, anytime you would read an article that was critical of Obama, like legitimately, it would start off with, "Here's the things he did," you know, blah blah blah. He messed this up, but then comments would immediately fill with racist stuff, which always gave everybody, see, everybody criticized him as racist. And it was like, well, they would lead into that, and you have the people that, no, I don't like him for these other reasons, but like, you seem to go back to just the race thing pretty quick.
Yeah.
maybe that is your problem. Then you found the thing, but I came from it from, again, I don't really care for politicians in general that much, and I like Obama more than most. But hey, facts are, this is a funny angle. If I can't watch Rosemary's Baby, if you're gonna get mad at me for that, well, then you can't watch whatever dog shit Obama was putting on Netflix. I don't even know, did he ever actually produce anything? Did he take
I think they produced a number of things. Michelle Obama, I know, was involved with. There was like a really cute kid show, like Mochi and Matas.
Oh, well, that's sweet.
Yeah, it was a good one. I totally, you know, there's no mention of Libya whatsoever in Mochi.
See, are we might kind of let my kids watch that just because, honey, you can't watch that adorable show because it was produced by a mass murderer.
Right. Yeah, and at the you know, and I think at the time, I think I did like a follow-up video where it's basically like saying, like, please, if you want to make criticism of Obama, do it along the lines of what he's actually doing. Like, stop being racist, because you're not helping, right? Yeah, there was I remember a friend of mine during I forget if it was Obama's first term or his second term, but like his family was like sending around this picture of like a chimpanzee with just the word Obama under it. And it's like, and he was like, do I even have to explain like why this is just a foul fucking thing to do? Yeah. So that definitely didn't help things at the time.
That's what it's all like. It's any of the culture war, cancel culture stuff is, cancel stuff's all stupid, but there are a lot of chuds that that kind of, they don't fully justify it, but you are being the people they say everybody that criticizes them, or you are giving them a pretty big defense by immediately being racist and sexist on this dumb shit.
Yeah, the Westworld bit that we did, so there's so many times like in my career in comedy where I produce something and I'm like, this is gonna blow up. People are gonna love this. And I don't know if it's like, maybe the sketch wasn't as good as I thought it was, or it didn't resonate because Westworld wasn't that good of a show. But we produced a video, basically Westworld Yelp reviews. And it's like, just imagine all of the, awful shit that happens in Westworld and how somebody would react to it. One of the lines being like, this is a terrible place to bring children. Like, I kill a hooker and then the next day she's alive. Like, this is really, I want the hooker dead,
That kills the turnoff for me. You don't understand.
Right. I thought that one was going to be, I thought that was going to be a hit. I thought that was, with the single that we were leading with. But the one that did really well which was your idea, was The Problem with Bumblebee Man, based on, I know you don't remember his name. You blocked it out. Hari Kondabolu.
Oh, yeah. I was like dumb douchebag. I think is the I referred to him as that guy.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Hari Kondabolu is an activist comedian, American. His parents are Indian, and he made a documentary called "The Problem with Apu," which is basically a complete, an attempt to tear down this beloved Simpsons character for being more than anything, having like a stereotypical Indian accent, right?
Yeah, well, I think more annoyed that Apu has got the job, contributes to society.
Right.
That's deeply offensive to some of these assholes. He should just be rich and not do. He shouldn't go to work 9 to 5 and work hard. He should just be money. Can't you make him the CEO of the company instead? That was a lot of the complaints. And what it really was is it's somebody with no talent trying to get attention for themselves. Mm-hmm. And the fact that guy didn't even get, I don't even think got a Daily Show spot or anything out of all that.
I know. Yeah.
How bad you have to suck to not be able to get a spot on the Daily Show in this day and age if you're playing the race card and you can't get your own your own bullshit fake news show.
Right.
You have to really suck because that bar is super low.
Yeah. One of the earlier episodes of my podcast, I had a guy on, an author who wrote a book called "I Love Apu," and it was actually in response to Hari Kondabolu's documentary. And for that guy, it was, he saw a lot of really positive qualities in Apu. He's one of the favorite characters of The Simpsons. He's like the one character that kind of has his shit together and like calls things out.
Like the most positive character of anybody.
Yeah. And then if any of you can bring yourselves to watch the Problem with Apu, you'll notice that all the people that Hari interviews are all people in like Hollywood. So it's like all these Indian Americans who are in Hollywood. He doesn't
interview a single working class person.
No. Not one. And I think in large part it's because if he were to do that, he would, basically, it would be hurting the premise of his film, because
nobody that works gives a shit or thinks, one, they wouldn't care if it was offensive, and two, they would know it's not offensive.
Yeah. And also the other thing, and I pointed this out in my book, and I have a chapter about it. There's a scene in his documentary where he's like, nobody sounds like Apu. Nobody, not one person sounds like Apu. Like this is such a ridiculous stereotypical accent. It doesn't exist. And then we cut to his parents, and his parents have like fucking, uber Apu level of a stereotypical accent.
I mean, I think that's a lot of I don't know, I say embarrassment of the parents is what the real issue is. Which is also like, that's so fucked up. Like your parents, immigrants who came over, worked hard, and you're like embarrassed because they're not upper class American enough, white enough for you, which is what the real issue is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just that guy being, I love The Simpsons until 9/11 happened. And
that
first of all, I didn't realize India bombed the World Trade Center. That was eye-opening for me. I didn't realize it was the Indians that were the ones that attacked the World Trade Center.
Yeah, instead of building 7, it was building 7-Eleven. I really like that. I want that to be the new conspiracy theory. That'd be fucking great. He had that thing going for him, and there was what was he? Oh, and then ultimately he tried to get Hank Azaria into the dock. Hank Azaria did not do it, but then he ended up Azaria ended up like apologizing for his.
Yeah, they finally did
three
the struggle
decades.
session for him. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 decades of doing that accent. So yeah, it's a yeah. I how do I put this? That documentary has played a bigger role in my life than I thought. Like when I watched it, when I wrote an article for Spiked magazine about it that I ended up expanding into a chapter in my book. And then, yeah, the more that I think about it, the more it just angers me. And I think it angers me too, just being the son of an immigrant who also has like a really thick fucking accent. When people meet my dad, they don't. It's difficult for them to understand what he's saying. So I've become like bilingual in that I speak English and I speak my dad's English, to be able to like translate for people. And I love accents, man. I mean, one of the things about like, I think growing up in New York in like the 80s and 90s is like for one, there was like at the time an actual New York accent that I
Yeah,
people speak.
Which barely exists. You have to go out into Long Island or the darkest parts of Queens to still find those accents. But yeah.
Yeah, either that or you have to get me really drunk and angry. And then it comes out. Yeah, so it was like you'd have like real like New Yorker accents, and then you would also have, all these immigrant populations with like, I mean, God, the kids I grew up with, Greeks and Armenians and stuff, all like first generation. And it's just fun. I mean, there's a reason why like stand-up comedians who can do accents why they do so well. Yeah. Like a funny accent is funny.
Yeah.
And it's fun to play with and to hear. So, and so, yeah, so the thing that we did together, the problem with Bumblebee Man, the premise being, Hari Kondabolu inspired me to, make my own documentary about how the Simpsons treated my people, Hispanics who dress like bumblebees. And that was like an epic video. I think it's like 8 or 9
that's pretty long. Long. Yeah, it was a long, because we could have made a full length feature out of that. I think there's so many ideas to work with.
Yeah, and making stuff, making online videos. People are always concerned about length. They're like, oh, it's too long, or people are only going to watch it, whatever. But really, I mean, I've always just been of the mind something should be as long as it is funny. And then ultimately it's like, okay, well, if someone just sticks around for 2 minutes, there's going to be some people who stick around for the whole 8 and enjoy the whole 8. But I think the one scene that I think people are probably maybe tuning out before they get to it is where my character sits down with a guy who he thinks is also like a fellow Hispanic who dresses as a bumblebee, and it turns out he's just a furry who's looking to fuck. And I think that was a particularly great scene. So, yeah, we don't fuck in it.
No, not on camera.
Yeah. Me and Justin Perez.
Yeah, that's the BTS.
Related. Yeah. Well,
it's not weird. We're not cousins. It's not weird. We're just two guys dressed as bumblebees having sex.
That's right. Yeah. Did you ever hear like about the movie Cruising? How like William Friedkin. Apparently, he had gone to a friend of his was like gay and into the S&M scene in New York, at the gay S&M scene in New York, and apparently he like went and filmed and basically had like all this kind of gay porn material that he could have spliced in. I remember hearing about that. For some reason, Cruising with Al Pacino has a special place in my heart. It's The Problem with Apu and Cruising. Those are 2 movies that somehow have impacted me more than I thought they would.
I love Cruising. I went and saw it just like I maybe last year's after William Friedkin died. They did like a Alamo, like an afternoon screening. Just then there by myself, married dad, just watching Cruising, looking around, being like, yeah, this is. This is an odd bunch here at an afternoon screening of Cruising.
Yeah, I've always,
But
yeah, for people who don't know, like not only do you work on short comedies, but also you write and direct features. And I've always, well, I'm someone you can go and you could steal this idea if you want. I've always wanted to do a remake of Cruising, and have it still based in that same time period, like the early, late 1970s, early 1980s. But at the time, but while you have Pacino or the the cop trying to track down this serial killer in this S&M scene, at the same time, I think having like the beginnings of AIDS would add like a really cool element to it. So you kind of have like, here's a serial killer killing all these people, but then you also have young men just kind of dropping like flies.
But the real killer is inside the house.
Right.
I think if it would have been made a year or two, if it had been made a year or two later, they probably would have incorporated that. It was like they were completely, which I think is why a lot of people like Cruising as like a time capsule of like, not that it's 100% accurate, but it's like right before, it's like within 2 years later, it's like devastated.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know if it was Fran Lebowitz, who wrote this article. I don't know if it was in like the Village Voice or something like that, but just talking about just how AIDS has completely wrecked the art scene in New York. Like guys at 25 years old, brilliant like fashion designers and dancers and artists just gone. It's wild. Okay, that's it. I don't want to talk about anything else. We ended on a high note.
So Bumblebee Man and AIDS epidemic. Yeah, I think Bumblebee Man, or not Bumblebee, I think Problem Apu destroyed just as much art as AIDS did. That's my Ari Kondolobu is the modern day AIDS.
Yeah, he or the grid. They would call it grid at the time. Yeah. So something I want to talk about. Why don't we talk about Bring Out the Damned? So I'll set this up just by saying I am so happy to have played just even a tiny role in this epic comedy horror series, and so I'll let you take it from there.
No, thank you. So I've been working on it's been a little over 3 years since we started it, like pre-production and everything. It's a horror comedy. Bring on the Damned. It's an anthology, 5 stories. Each story is done in a different genre. It was basically a lot of ideas I had sitting around, like, I'm never going to get to make these. I should put them all into, I was having one of those, this is it, I'm done. Never going to make anything again. Maybe I'll make one more movie or something. Like, well, let's put all my ideas into one thing. And if this is the last thing I do, at least I got a lot of these ideas out of my head. And all of them are, a little over 20, a little under 20 minutes, but 5 stories. Not really much of an overall connection to them other than 5 genres. Like we do like a found footage exorcism movie. We do serial killer movie done as a French New Wave film. We do like a De Palma giallo-esque erotic thriller type thing. We have a noir, a sci-fi themed noir in black and white, and then we have like a live action Josie and the Pussycats meets David Fincher mashup.
Yeah. Well, where's the next place that it's screening?
We have a few screens coming up. If you're in Mexico City at Cinemania on November 3rd, we'll be screening there. I don't know the exact time, but look up Cinemania.
December 3rd?
No, November 30th in Mexico City.
Okay, cool. This is going to go out tomorrow. So
yeah, okay. And then December 7th at Teaneck, New Jersey, we will be at the Northeast Film Festival Horror Fest. If you go to that, or if you follow me on Instagram, you can get the ticket. You can see the information to get tickets. Brandon BLOL. But our big screening, our New York premiere, is January 18th at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens. That's kind of our big one. So we haven't played in New York yet. We haven't played outside of film festivals yet. And this is going to be our first, on the big screen there. It's a great theater. That's what we're pretty excited about. But January 18th, their tickets aren't on sale yet, but they should be on sale any day now. But January 18th, lock that date down.
Oh yeah. The
And come see me and a bunch of the cast and the crew, and it'll be a big party and a big fun experience. A lot of people, a ton of people worked on it, and very few people have actually seen it yet. We've only done 2 screenings so far. So
yeah, are you going to be in Mexico City?
no, I'm not. I can't make Mexico City. That's a little too far. I just got back from Orlando for our screening there, and I can't travel to Mexico City just yet.
I mean, there's plenty of Mexicans in Orlando.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. I went around and asked Mexicans what they think of the movie, and like, this is what it would have been like. I'll be in Teaneck, New Jersey. Scenic Teaneck, New Jersey.
Well, when I saw, I forget which venue I saw it. It was during one of the horror festivals.
Yeah, you saw it. That was our very first screening in Jersey City, the Jersey City Horror Fest. A nice little cozy screening. There is a test run for us.
Yeah, and I remember at the time, one of the comments that I had was like, you do such a good job with genre and parody of genre. And there's a thing too about Basham's, writing and direction where, if you think you've seen like a horror film, like, what's coming and all that. And it's like, no, Bassham will give you a line that it's like, holy shit. And there was so much really, you do such a great job of presenting really fucked up things in such a funny way, that it's a real gift, and it's been working with you great. And I particularly love your first drafts of things because there are things there that I know when you put it down, there's no fucking chance that I'm going to be able to film this or have somebody say it. But I feel like, whether you know it or not, you're entertaining me on, on the level. And you're also one of the people ask me too, like all the time, like, oh, do you ever, is there ever, like jokes or something like that you don't release? And I say, well, I have a couple of friends who are terrible for me because I send them something like a draft and then they laugh. And then I'm like, okay, I guess I got to send this out, and you're one of them, So in part, if I get in trouble for anything,
you gotta blame me.
Yeah, I'm gonna blame you. It's not my fault. Yeah, it's not my fault. So bringing out the damned.
Bring on the damned.
Jesus, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay, because when I was coming with the name, I had the list of every variation of it. Bring out the damned, bring on the damned, bring out the dead, bring on the dead. Yeah, it was. Before I locked it down to something that this sounds more horror-ish. I was trying to make it a little more horror, a little less comedy. Although if you watch it, like, this is a comedy, but if you see my previous stuff, like, no, this is way less comedy than the other ones were.
Yeah, and not to give anything away, but there is one of the shorts in particular. There is dancing that goes on and on and on. That is so freaking funny. I'm talking about the one that takes place in the club, and it's just like, it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going. It was really great. Is this so you've done a lot of stuff with Troma? Is this part of the Troma universe?
This is kind of the first thing that they fully produced. I did my first 2 movies entirely on my own, but then they picked them up to distribute them. And then in my 3rd movie, I was mostly producing on my own, but we ran out of money and they came in and helped us finish it. And then this one, there's other producers. They are the primary, like, this is the first like 100% Troma production that I've done.
Nice. Yeah. And what does that mean as far as like distribution? Because there are a lot of, I think that's something that comes up a lot at like film festivals and stuff, in particular, people looking to start out, where it's like, okay, I figured out how to make something, but what does distribution mean? Especially what does distribution mean now that, so much is, video on demand and online and whatnot,
Well, Troma, they're like people don't know, they're like the oldest independent film studio, well, probably in the world, definitely in America. They've been around for 50 years now. and Toxic Avenger and things like that. Especially in the early '80s, a lot of the really like crazy stuff you'd see in video stores. That was Troma. And they started like James Gunn started there. Trey Parker and Matt Stone from South Park started there. So they've been kind of a launching pad. So they still distribute. They have their own streaming app, Troma Now. So they anything they get, that at least goes on there, if nothing else. But then they have deals worked out with Peacock, and they in and out of Netflix and stuff with Tubi and stuff with Amazon. So because they were distributing, we got on a lot of streaming platforms. And they also, the more important thing to me, because Trump is famously also for not making any money. And I knew that going in, they're very upfront, like there's no money to be made here. But they promote me. They released all of our movies on Blu-ray, which meant a lot. Is like a big movie nerd, having a physical copy of a movie meant a lot to me. As I talked to some streaming services, and they're like, I would have made more money, but the guys were honest, like, we're gonna dump this online and we're never gonna promote it. It's just gonna be floating around out there, and there's gonna be no streaming release. I would have had gotten made more money off of it, but it would have been forgotten. And especially like wanting to have a career and wanting to keep moving forward, I need the attention, and I need to build an audience more. So, and I was a big fan of Troma. It was like one of the cool things to work with them. So by being with them, there's apps. I have an avenue to different platforms that I would not have on my own.
And with with this, it's sort of like are you looking to expand any of the shorts into something longer?
I wasn't really planning on expanding into the shorts and something longer. I mean, I'm open to it. If anybody who's ever, hey, you want to expand, I would do it.
Sure.
I was more looking at it to help draw attention to pitch other ideas that I have that are for feature length, or to do a second one of another collection of shorts, because there's ideas I had that we're not able to put into this one, and I would do another. We have There's different times depending on my mood. We call it bring on the damn volume one, or sometimes the volume one isn't there. It depends on how I'm feeling at that time.
Mm-hmm.
If it's volume one, it's like, yeah, I'm going to do another one. And sometimes I leave that off, and that's when I'm in the mood of I'm never going to do anything again. I'm tired of this. So just if you see me call it bring on the dams, I'm in a bad mood that day. If I put on volume one, I'm like, oh, he's looking to the next. Like we're already in pre-production for part two.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, because we're so low budget, I mean, the movie's $20,000. I have to bring that up because people watch, this is really low budget, but I tell them it's $20,000. Then they're like, whoa. Because
That's insane.
it definitely looks low budget, but if you see it, it looks like it's a way bigger like a low budget is like $300,000 is like a low budget. 20 grand is like no money at all. I mean, it's a lot of money for me as a human being, as a person, but as a film, that's a very small amount. So we're starting now, because it could take years to get anything done. And then I also have ideas for just more straightforward movies that I'm trying to pitch to get produced. Like here's like an actual straightforward horror movie, not any of my flights of fancy. Because I'm like, if I'm making this myself, I'm going to make what I want to make. Yeah. But I'm like, if somebody's going to put up some money, I will try to make it a little more accessible to the audience.
Yeah, but you also did. I mean, you did like everything on this thing. Like you wrote, you directed, and then you cut it too, right?
Yeah, I did the editing on it, and the color grading, and the sound mixing, and all that. Yeah, I had to do it all. We got no budget, but also like becoming more of a control freak the more I work on stuff. Because anything that's not under my control, it's like and you don't have a lot of money. You're asking for favors and wait for people to get back, and just sitting around waiting for people to get back to me drives me crazy. I'm like, I could rather be sitting at the computer for 12 hours. Like, I feel like I have control over it. I'm getting worse about. Well, it's weird to say this one's a lot more personal than my other movies, because if you watch like this, you think personal, you're thinking like there's a character that's very closely based on me, the character's relationship with his dad or something. Like, no, it's just here's people getting their dicks chopped off, but it is personal to me. So I cared a lot more about this one than not that I don't care about my other movies. My first movie was a big deal because I always wanted to make a movie. It took me, decades to get into a place where I could make one. And then I made two quick ones just because I wanted to keep making movies. And then this was back to being kind of personal, like, because I worked on it so long. And beyond shooting for a year and a half or 2 years, then there's like a year of editing. So I'm very like locked into it.
Yeah, with the with the work on it, like what was I going to say? I was you're talking about how personal it was to you. Like, have you always been like a fan of like horror? Because we're I'm 42. We're like the same age.
Yeah.
And when we were the amount of like low budget B movie horror that has stuck in my brain, like God, what's it like? God, what was it? Summer Camp. I think
Sleepaway Camp.
Sleepaway Camp. Yeah, you're gonna have to correct every single one. Sleepaway Camp. Day of the Comet, is it, or Night of the Comet?
Night of the Comet.
Night of the Comet. And just countless others that. Well, for one, I mean, they're horror movies, and we had like HBO at the time, so we would. I as a kid, I would catch them on HBO, but then there would be other versions of it that was just kind of on broadcast TV, just like Channel 9 or 11 or whatever. And they're some of they're terrible in some ways, but yet there's elements of it that are pretty amazing if they're able to kind of stay in my head, 40 years later,
Well, yeah, the trashy horror movies of the 80s, people have a lot of affection. One, you just grew up with them, and because between video stores and just late night cable, they kind of entrenched. And yeah, they're not particularly good, but there's just things about them that stand out. Like, you'll watch a movie and it's like mostly boring or half, but then there's one just insane sequence that's what most of your old cult movies are.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, it's not good start to finish, but there's just something so bizarre about it. Or actors giving bizarre performances and things like that. Like, yeah, it's not a great movie, but what we like about it is, this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a kid, I was in the video store age, and it was the horror movies and comedies. So it was Bring Home Police Academy 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and That's a Night. And that was the two big combinations of like really shitty 80s comedies.
And the horror movie being funnier than the comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so those were always two of my big influences, and I loved them. Although I was more focused on doing comedy stuff for a long time. I just thought that was easier to do. And then I started moving more towards doing horror stuff and doing film stuff. Basically, comedy started becoming borderline illegal, or just that died. Like I was doing tons of comedy videos, and that started drying up. I was like, well, I always want to make a movie. I should move over to make a movie. And I didn't want. It was getting to where comedy people just weren't watching comedy that much. Not even before we get to any cancel shit. Just I think it just been oversaturated the market. There was so much comedy in the 2000s. That I think people just kind of got numb to it, and they weren't as excited about looking. I think people said, "Why am I watching comedy? I can go make my own." That sort of stuff. So I was like trying to find another. I'm like, well, why don't I do horror? If I'm going to make a movie, and horror movies are more fun too. You do a comedy, it's like everybody's low budget comedies are again based loosely on themselves. To be the lead character is very much like me, working a shitty job. We can shoot at the office, and he's like this girl or that girl, that sort of shit. I'm like, I don't. What's the fun of making a movie like that? If we make a horror movie, one, horror audiences will watch anything, but it's just the same thing. It's lots of jokes, but then we also get to chop somebody's head off. We get to spray blood everywhere. It's like more visually interesting to do and more fun as a filmmaker. If you're going to sit around for 8 hours filming something, it's kind of nice to rip somebody's arm off or do like a special effect like that. It's a little more entertaining to be on set for than just people talking at each other all day.
Yeah. Well, ever since I was a kid, my favorite horror movies have always been zombie movies. Like the original Dawn of the Dead is probably like my favorite. Night of the Living Dead is incredible movie on its own. And just talking about like how some of these things were this project was kind of like personal to you. Do you ever find yourself like kind of exercising some demons or like nightmares of your own? Because when I bring up the zombies being a big my favorite genre, I remember as a kid having these nightmares where I would be chased by zombies, and then at some point in the dream I was able to remind myself that I could just walk by them like they're not, like they're not real and all that. But I don't know. I wish I knew kind of like the exact like age or whatever where I realize, oh, I can control this and not allow the zombies to be, to scare me like they, like they used to.
Not in. I think I'm exercising a lot of stuff, but not like in a clear. It's one of the things I probably should analyze myself too much. If you go through like, oh, this guy's working some shit out.
But yeah, and I don't want to do
Unconsciously.
and I'm not. I don't want to do that to you too. I don't want this to be like a.
No, no, it's fine.
Brandon, I brought you here. Like that, I brought you here because I'm worried about you.
So much violence against women in the movie. Yeah. Right. No, there's probably a lot of stuff being worked out, but not in the way that you would think, if that makes sense. It's not like the big scenes are. It's probably some little shit. The noir one is probably pretty personal. But again, I've not analyzed myself enough to get into that. It gets a little darker and grimmer than the other ones. Mm-hmm. And not that I'm, an a war vet or anything, but there's parts in that are a little more of like, I felt more connected to that. But my probably me knowing exerting through my previous movie, Slashing the Final Beginning, where it's just annoying Brooklyn people being brutally murdered. That's probably, we have a guy like a Mumford & Sons type guy getting beat to death with ukulele. I'm like, that's definitely me. Just that's very much me. Just this is what I want to do to the guy from Mumford & Sons, not to bash him. So it's just that type.
Yeah. Well, I mean, recently, there was that incident with that guy, that young, social justice warrior walking in, Brooklyn at, I don't know what time in the AM, at least 2 a.m. with his girl. And he sees a black fella, kind of acting out and, I don't know if he's kicking cars, something like that. And this guy, this SJW, thinks it's a good idea to say, "Hey man, what are you doing?" or something like that. And he ends up getting stabbed to death in front of his girlfriend.
That's almost a scene from my movie, practically, of just being nothing directly like that, but of just like, "Hey, what are you stabbing me for? I'm so sorry."
Yeah. And then later on,
I apologize. Can you let me wait before you kill me? Let me do a land acknowledgement before I die. Let me my final words to be.
I knew when I was gentrifying this neighborhood that at some point I would have to...
You know what? Good for you, pal. You got me.
Yeah.
My bad.
And yeah, I wish, I don't know if anyone's done like any like follow-up interviews with the girlfriend, but shortly after.
No, there was one, or unless you're talking about, there was one shortly after. She was being an absolute shithead.
I don't know if she was behind the GoFundMe, but there was a GoFundMe for his friends.
Yeah.
Who were, so traumatized by his death that they didn't think they would be able to work. And they needed to get a little money to help them not work and grieve, which is just, it's just incredible.
Well, if you've seen your friend die, how are you going to write recaps of TV shows for AV Club? You just need a break. You need a long break from one of those difficult jobs that those people have.
Yeah. Now imagining like, their boss comes in, it's like, "Hey, I watched that episode last night and a young man was not stabbed to death." Like you keep inserting this plot point into every single thing that you're seeing. Are you so you're from Florida originally, right?
Polk County, Florida.
What is people have an idea of like Florida, the stereotypical Florida man, crazy shit always happening. Did you live in, is that where you come from?
Yeah, I mean the really crazy. I mean it's there's different parts of Florida. There's the Miami area. Then outside of Miami is like Hialeah. That's where they did all the bang bus stuff. That's where all the internet porn boom was there. And then Central Florida's got crazy stuff. And then North Florida, when you get to like outside of Gainesville and Jacksonville, you get closer to the Georgia border. That's a lot of the really crazier white trash parts. Central Florida, Orlando, and Tampa live between there. So there's definitely. Growing up there, I knew like, people are kind of crazy here. But when I moved to New York and then would go back to visit, that's when it stood out even more. Like I remember going home to visit after I'd been in New York for a while during the Casey Anthony trials, and everybody's the whole country's watching the Casey Anthony stuff. And I'm at home with my parents watching the news, and Casey Anthony was like the 5th craziest story that day on the news. And I was just like, that's insane. And my parents were like, yeah, it's a crazy world. Like, no, that's just here. This isn't happening anywhere else. It's always stories of just like some teenagers lured a kid from school over to their house and murdered him and tried to burn his body in their Weber grill. Like things like that happen like on a semi-regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Like that movie Bullies, a pretty good, pretty accurate Florida recreation. So I knew when I lived, like, this is crazy, but it didn't really stand out how it's not like that everywhere else. And people were like, how are you going to move to New York? Aren't you scared? And like, no, because I lived in a much worse neighborhood. I lived off of Orange Blossom Trail, or OBT, like before I moved. And that's like, we would drive home when it worked really late nights sometimes. We'd drive home like 3 a.m. And it was like the Dave Chappelle bit. Like there's just babies out on the lawn, like hanging out. I'm like, oh, this is fucked up. But like on the street I lived right before I moved to New York, 3 cops were killed over the course of a year, and that on that street. So I'm like, New York's not really that. Once I got used to like just being in a city, like this is way chiller than what I'm used to from being in Florida.
Yeah, I wonder if you basically coming from a horror movie to a rather chiller, more regular place, kind of maybe that helped light something creatively. It's like maybe you had a little bit of a distance to see the outside.
Yeah.
Like,
So I've always, if anything, I've always been a little bit. I mean, everybody calls me an outsider. Like I get along with almost everybody, but I don't fully belong anywhere. Like I get along fine with hillbillies and rednecks and everybody. I grew up with them, and I have no problem going into when I'm home. I'll go into whatever the redneck bars are, and you chat with people. I can. Wherever neighborhood I've lived in New York, I'm the only white guy. It's fine. I get along with everybody. But of course, I'm not like, I don't ever think I'm down. I don't I don't start trying to join in with the slang and everything with everybody. Even when I was like at UCB, which I still kind of there, with your wealthy hipster types, like I get along with everybody, but there's always, even though that seems like where I'd fit in the most, definitely a barrier because I'm not a Ivy League college grad. I'm not like, and that's very clear when I started trying to get writing jobs. And I'm like, funniest person in the room, but also the only person in the room that didn't go to, the right schools.
yeah.
And I have to watch those people. And they make it clear, like, hey, you're not really one of us. Like,
yeah,
you're funny and everything, and you're kind of more or less similar interests, but you didn't go to Harvard or, so there is a barrier there. So that's kind of everywhere I'm at. I'm like, which is good for observation and for doing humor, of it keeps you from getting like not go see the forest for the trees. I'm never too in the thick of anything, and this is why with politics, since I don't really have a specific political affiliation, I'm never like ignoring my side a little bit to make fun of the others. It's like, nah, I don't care for. I mean, I like and hate all of you equally.
That's a good way to put it. And I find it too, like with me, like doing comedy, doing stand up, especially, I guess the level of where I am now, like as far as like stand up goes, like doing smaller shows in smaller towns and that sort of thing. And I just came back from a little, tiny tour of Texas that was put together by the Libertarian Party of Texas. They have a Mises caucus who have been great to me over the years. And they booked me for 3 shows, one outside of Austin, Texas in Round Rock. And then the next day was San Antonio, and then finished off in Houston. And yeah, it's one of those things where, technically I'm a New Yorker. I went to NYU and all that, but like, I grew up with, my dad's a butcher, my dad's an immigrant butcher. We're from Queens, and I really just like being able to perform for, different kinds of people and have stuff work. And I think not to toot my own horn, but like a buddy of mine asked if, do I change my material up depending on, where I am? And I said, no, I mean, really, for the most part, I'm doing the same stuff. So like I opened for Jimmy Dore at a big show in New Jersey, and did really well for the Jimmy Dore crowd. And then I did a buddy show in Jersey City with a much more liberal crowd. Now Jimmy Dore is kind of like, I don't know, I'm necessarily far left. I don't know how you would
Yeah,
necessarily.
he's kind of doesn't belong to anywhere either, but a lot of
Yeah.
people like him because he doesn't really belong to. Yeah, he'd be far left, except the far left hate him. So
Yeah. So I would say, yeah. So like being able to perform for Jimmy Dore's audiences, my libertarian audiences, conservative audiences, and then doing like what I would call like an audience of kind of more like traditional liberal progressives in a blue state, a Democrats, and doing the same material but having it work. And I think that's a really fun thing to do, to be able to do that and not at any point feel like I'm pandering to anybody,
I've always tried to avoid the pandering because I do not like that. I mean, I've maybe done a handful of jokes ever. I'm like, that's kind of pandering. What I think the goal is, you want everybody to laugh. You don't want to be just like so insular where you're because it's easy to be off-putting, just be like a Tim and Eric thing. I'm like, I'm so weird and like it's not funny, but you don't get it. Like, well, maybe you're just not funny and you have to do that. The goal is to do what you think is funny, but then try to execute in a way that other people find it funny too.
Yeah.
Like I've never tried to change what I'm doing. It's just like, you know what? This is a super weird idea that nobody else would think of or find funny. Can I structure this in a way where they find it funny? I think that's always been, especially doing live comedy whenever I was still doing like stage stuff. That was the fun part to me. This is the exciting part. And like, I know they'll laugh at this joke, but I don't want them to laugh at that joke. I want this fucked up weird thing that they would never laugh at in a million years. Can I trick them into laughing at this stuff they normally wouldn't do? And if they don't laugh, I can be, well, they didn't get it. I'm like, it's my job to make them get it. It's not my job to pander or to change what I'm doing, but it's my job to execute it better. Yeah. And that's always kind of been the goal, because I do like that. I like when we've done screenings of movies, I get a weird cross section of people because I did go through Upright Citizens Brigade and the hipster New York comedy crowd, but then also the Troma people who are wrestlers and porn stars and tattoo, or it's two different crowds, and can I entertain both of them? And we get people who are kind of very nice people, very kind of genteel, and to get them to laugh at the fucked up stuff is that we have to take them along for it. And then also getting the people who like the rowdy shit, can I also slip some smart stuff by them? Mm-hmm. One of my big influences for that was my mom, who did not really like dirty jokes or humor or anything, but she loved Robert Schimmel, one of the dirtiest comedians ever.
Oh yeah.
And because of how he would do his jokes, he would say a punchline, you think it's over, then he would tag it with something dirtier. Then he'd just keep elevating, and he'd get her to laugh one time at something, and then she was hooked, and he'd go more and more fucked up. And I took her to see him even when it was very nearly into both of their lives. And just she had a great time, and she used to always get so mad at me and my dad for watching dirty comics, but she loved this guy who was maybe the dirtiest at the time, and it's just because of his delivery system. I'm like, well, that's what I got to do. I got to like hook people that wouldn't laugh at this stuff, and that's a bigger victory than knowing they're going to laugh at it and just giving them what is going to work.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know Robert Schimmel, like definitely you can go down a rabbit hole and just hear great stuff. And it's so unfortunate, a guy who I remember hearing other comedians talk about him. It was like he was just right at a point where he was definitely going to break, I think, for a much wider audience. And the poor guy, passes away. Was it cancer that?
It was he had been fighting cancer because he did some specials and shows and albums after he had cancer. Yeah, it was just like an ongoing, because he had some great material about. That's why I took my mom. My mom was going through cancer at the same time, and it was like it was a great combination. And he was doing, I think he was also in a weird time, maybe where comedy was. I think he would have been in the 90s when comedy kind of like the 80s boom, and then there's the 90s kind of bottomed out a little bit. And then I think he would have right before the internet really took off, where people could have been posting YouTube clips of him and stuff. And he was successful, but I think he would have been, it's weird that he's not more remembered and referenced more, because he was very funny.
It seems like there's just so many comedians that are just kind of, forgotten until you stumble across their material. One of the things that I've wanted to post about, is watching old appearances on Johnny Carson, stand up sets that still hold up. And the amount of like the comedians where, you're watching a set from 40 or 50 years ago and you're like, holy shit, you could do that set now. And you'd have the strongest set around. So like, Rodney Dangerfield, obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, his stuff will just continue to crush. Gary Shandling, his first appearance on Johnny Carson is so fucking good. It's really just amazing. And he also comes off too as with his delivery and his whole presence. He just smiles and happy to be there and just enjoying every single second of it. And as is the audience. And it's kind of like a magical, thing to watch, as somebody who's, trying to do the same thing, in front of audiences. When you were talking about, about your mom not liking dirty comedians, it reminds me when I was a kid, I played ice hockey, and one of my friends, David Jose, we would often carpool. So we would go on like hockey tournaments. So it would be David, his mom, Dolores, and his dad, Elidio, who was Portuguese. And it would be me, David, and my mom, going on the tournament. And I used to have the Jerky Boys on tape, and we would listen to the Jerky Boys, and we would be cracking up, every single one of us, except for his dad. His dad did not like dirty jokes and cursing and stuff, but yet he was, kind enough that he would, let us listen to, Saul Rosenberg, the Egyptian, the Egyptian magician, and all that.
The glory days of comedy tapes and CDs.
Oh, dude. So a lot of people don't. A lot of people might not know this, but you teach comedy, and when I'm this question comes up a lot when I'm on podcasts and stuff, where people are like, "Oh, can you teach comedy?" So since I've taught comedy a little bit, but as you've been doing it for a lot longer than I have, can you teach comedy?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody just isn't funny or just doesn't have any timing, they're just kind of hopeless. But if people are funny, you can help teach them some structure. And if they learn a little bit of structure, then they can be funnier. I think that, and a lot of people are, most people that come to do it can write. They could write some decent jokes. It's just not knowing how, they need feedback and to when to cut shit out and things like that. But you'll get whatever your level of talent is. You can improve a lot by doing a class or two. I mean, you still have to kind of, because students ask me sometimes too, like, well, how'd you do it? I'm like, well, because I'm a fucking psycho that would beat myself up for days at a time over not getting a joke right. So, and like, I don't necessarily, are you going to do that? Well, then here's some tips where I can give you,
Right.
Other than like, when you ask me, my secrets are, I was obsessed with this stuff since childhood. And I used to daydream because I would hated school so much. I would disassociate and daydream jokes and stories and stuff like that. And then I would get in trouble at school because I hated my teachers. It was just to get through the day, I'll start fucking with my teachers. And it's a lifelong process of this. And then when I started writing comedy, I would stay up to get a sketch right. I'd stay up for days. I would beat myself up until I get it worded just right. If shows didn't go well, I would beat myself up. I've gotten better about that aspect of it, but it was a long process of like, once I got all that and I kind of developed who I am, now it's not stressful or anything, but like, it was a lot of work. But anybody, if you do have a knack for it, even to a little degree, you'll get better if you take the classes and if you study, if you pay attention. But if somebody just does not have any either comedic timing or if they're too crazy, because that's like there's people who are super funny, but they're just too crazy they need like handlers to they can give you the right, and you got to take it. Which I mean, you have that in writing staffs. Like, this person just says some crazy shit, and then somebody else will take it and mold it into something. But people who just don't have comic timing inherently, they're not going to get it. They can maybe at best, if they practice a lot, fake it a little bit, but they can't really be funny. But if you have a little bit of like ability to tell a joke, yeah, you can learn and get better at it.
Yeah, I have a younger brother, my brother Mark, who has impeccable comic timing, and like just it comes so natural in conversation. And he's doing things that you teach people, like, oh, this is heightening, and this is doing callbacks in a, in a conversation that um, it's just a natural thing on his part. And this makes you think too. I mean, you've been doing what, comedy over probably as long as I have, like over 20 years at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah. I mean,
And
I've been in New York doing it like seriously since 2006 is when I
mm,
moved to New York and started really doing it. And then I was since like 99 or 2000, I was trying to make like internet videos with my friends in Florida, my roommates and stuff. Like the soon the first digital cameras came out, start filming stuff. And that was very loose because I couldn't find other people to work with. But I was trying to do it as early as that.
right,
It just took a while before I found like other people who were wanted to do it more professionally and were more serious about it.
yeah, and it's the same. Like when I wrote the book, I sort of like holy shit, I've been doing this for 20 years. Like that's and in a way, it kind of just happened. You turn around and you're like, oh man, I've been at this for a long time. But I think it also kind of informed um, informed something in that I remember hearing James Maynard Keenan, the singer of Tool, who in the early 90s, I think he tried stand up a little bit, but he was talking about in reference to like if he's brought in on like a music project, how if you have him for an hour, you're not just getting an hour of his time, you're getting 40 years of music in that hour. And I think it's a similar thing too with comedy, where it's like, if somebody sends you a draft that they're working on, they're not just getting your hour of time, you're getting all this experience. And I bring that up because during the years where it was like, oh, here we go, another straight white man, another straight white man's perspective. It's like, well, who are the straight white men you're saying this about? Because
Yeah.
like last year I debated Michael Ian Black about wokeness in comedy, and I had a really
That comedy genius.
yeah.
Might be nice. I'm sorry. But yeah.
No, but one of the things that I really don't like is that like self-deprecating, like, I'm a straight white guy and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, no, you're not just a straight white guy. You're a guy with like 30 years of comedy experience, whether you're a fan of his or not. Like, you've done TV shows, you've done movies, you've written books, you've acted in a number of stuff. You have this whole wealth of experience that I think supersedes any of your straight white maleness stuff, And I was, during the time like of, I guess, like, comedy cancellations and people, deciding to be a lot more quiet about their political beliefs out of fear that they wouldn't book jobs. I knew guys where I was like, wow, you don't want this guy working on your project? This fucking guy who's, who makes everything better. You don't want him just because he's a straight white guy. And it's like, you're fucking out of your mind. Your work is going to fail because of this stupidity.
Well, if that's true, then why are late night shows booming right now? Going through a boom period. I think Seth Meyers didn't he have to add more band members because the show's doing so well? They're doing 6 nights a week now, I think, because he's blowing up. Yeah.
They got a full-time fucking triangle player now in the band. It's
extremely funny watching. They're like, the guys start selling off the furniture. We have all the late night shows just have folding chairs at a certain point because they're all going under. And they deserve it. They deserve it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Brandon Bassham. I have thoroughly enjoyed my years of work with him. And if all goes well, we will be working together for a long time. And I'd love to, and you're, what's it, season 2 or of Bring on the Damned?
Volume 1 coming soon. Volume 2, we were slightly sort of working.
Well, I want you to know that I'm in if you need me for anything, especially if you want me to play a sex creep like I did in
another sex creep.
one.
Yeah, you're very good at
it. Thank you. What was for the maybe I'll share. I'll put a picture in here. Yeah. What's funny is like I put on this outfit and it's like, oh man, what a fucking creepy, gross like outfit, and it's like those are my clothes. Like I own that outfit. Like there was a time when I actually wore that fucking shirt legitimately. I was like, I like this shirt. I like the way it looks, and boom, you get it there. So the movie is Bring on the Damned. I'll put all of the show times and stuff like that. If you're in Mexico City, get over to it, and then I'm really
something to do in Mexico City finally.
Yeah, finally. When you're done with the the hookers and the enchiladas, you can go get yourself some horror comedy. Brandon, thank you so much, man.
Thank you very much for having me.